Hey, welcome back. We're building a RANS S21 Outbound plane. In this episode, it's episode 26. I'm going to put the baggage floor in, forward baggage floor, which included some customization for a battery access door. And then I'm also going to put in my autopilot servos. There's a pitch servo and a roll servo. Things go pretty well. I ran into some parts problem with the servos, which I'll get into in the video, but pretty straightforward installation. The baggage floor, again, pretty straightforward. Probably what you can see behind me is the excitement. I got my panel test fitted in. I'll get started on the panel in the next video, but very excited to get that started. You know, the panel's a big part of the build, and that's exciting. I was going to do two segments or two videos, one for the baggage floor, one for the servos. They were going to be about 8 or 9 minutes each. I decided to combine them. It's about a 20-minute video, trying to catch up on my content. So it's a little bit long, but I knock off these two segments. And if there's one that interests you more than the other, you can go forward or back. Your choice. But with that, let's start with the baggage floor. While I'm waiting for my trim servo trays to arrive from RANS, I'm going to start working on some of the baggage closeout. The first part is to put these side baggage pieces in, and there's a diagram that I need to figure out. There's some nut plates that they're going to apparently go on to, and then I'm thinking these holes are for the cables to come through, so this is probably going to line up with this frame to a degree. So I'm going to figure out how these go in and continue with the installation. My method for transfer drilling and marking these holes is kind of a throw off of the old Eddie Gill paper trick. Is I took a piece of paper, taped it to the frame, wrapped it over, marked where the hole was, flipped the paper back, put my skin in, and now when I bring the paper down, keep it nice and flush, that mark is going to be right over the hole. Here's one that I just did, and it went in just perfect. Some of these are for 1/8 rivets, and then a couple are for 3/16 screws. So you got to be careful what you're, which ones you're doing. The next step is I'm laying in the forward floor, and then I've got a match drill for the nut plates. These are number 11s. So again, I'm using this tool that I've showed you before. I'll kind of demo it. I slide it underneath. I find my, let's see if I can get with the camera. Yep, I find my hole so that little nail drops through the hole. And then I've got the hole on top. I take my marker, snap that down, pull this out, and I've got my mark where I need to match my hole. Okay, I've got the bottom floor drilled out in all the hole places. The next thing I'm going to work on are these angle supports that attach to the bottom skin or to the floor skin, and then apparently also attach to the cage. I found the angle support material in a big bag of stuff. Apparently there's 3 of these. They're about 3 feet long, and they were in this large bag. Okay, these are what your support braces are going to look like. You kind of cut off some material so you create these tabs at each end. Some of them are going to screw into a nut plate hole, and in this case it tells you to position this one in between your nut plates. So this will be riveted to the floorboard and then only screwed into that end. Another one is going to get put here where it will have a hole for the nut, and then we'll brace up there. I've got to change my pattern a little bit from what the manual provides, because I am going to put an access door to my battery into the floorboard. Even though I've installed the remote charging post, which may be good for charging, I like the idea that I can get access to my battery at different times. There's a possibility I may have to remove the battery if something goes wrong. I'd also access to look if I've got some electrical problems, to access my master solenoid. Cutting all the pieces and trimming them took a while. The plan is, this isn't quite finished, but this is going to be a crossbar that's going to go underneath, and then this will attach up to here. In theory, this one was supposed to go back to this nut plate, but that put it right over the battery, which is where my door is going to be. So I put this cross beam in, and then these you have to trim around. You have to trim a lot of the flange off, and then you got to trim them around these channels. So there's a lot of trimming, and they fit up on top to get them to fit. Those two are pretty much by the book, but this side's a little bit different. So now I've got to get the skin on and get them riveted and clecoed and cleaned up, and then I'll put this door in over here. Okay, before I flip this over, I'm just going to show you what my pattern looks like. This is that bottom area that I had to adjust. This is the support angle that I put in. I did have to run another piece of bracing underneath this to level it out. It goes from one side to the other. This is where my battery door is going to go. And then these are the support angles that go over the gas tank with the notches cut out for the channels, and everything should fit. My next step is to put these nut plates in along the large tabs. These run across here. Quick note to builders, don't get your parts mixed up. These are 832 nut plates versus the 3/16 nut plates you've used before. And your machine screws, just because it says 832 machine screw, you've got 10s and you've got 6s. My 6s are over there, but just make sure. I had it backwards. I had to drill out 2 nut plates because I had the wrong nut plates in. Okay, I've come to a little confusion again. It says to install the nut plates to all the large tabs and to the lower flange of the forward side. Baggage compartment, refer to parts manual. So you come over to the parts manual, and they show the 5 nut plates here. There are holes pre-drilled in this lower flange, 2 on each flange, but there's no indication of any nut plates going in here. This number 7 nut plate is already installed from your baggage installation. They have you put a screw in there, number 7 screw, which is an 8/32 screw. But if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9 for the 2 flanges, but it's only showing 7 nut plates, not 9. I count 9, and I'm not seeing any holes. And then for the machine screws, they only say 2. And those 2 appear to be the ones on the side for the holes you've already drilled. I'm assuming the machine screws for here will show up on another piece. Now that I got my piece of hinge from Aircraft Spruce, I'm going to complete the battery door. This is the piece that I cut out. This is the heavier .040 that will act as the lid. And I'm going to attach these 2 together, put the hinge in, and then just have a flap door. Pretty simple construction. Okay, I finished the door for the battery cover, and it flips up, exposes my battery. I've got that 040, the heavier aluminum, riveted to the lighter one. It overlaps the edge here, so it's got support. I'm not really excited the way this came out, showing the hinge. But I had it tighter, and then the door wouldn't open, so I had to leave a gap here. There's probably a better way to do it, but that's why I'm a first-time builder and a rookie at some of this. But it works. I'm okay with it, and we'll move on. And that takes care of the floorboard. I got the servo tray installation kit from RANS. This is an option in the RANS kit and it's specifically made for the Garmin servos. They say there might be adjustments if you're using a different manufacturer's servo. This is for the autopilot. So I found in the manual at 10F 04 and 05, or 05 and 06 the parts diagram, which shows how it goes together. I couldn't find any text on it in section 10. I kind of went back and forth and didn't find any text. So I'm assuming we're just going to put it together following the parts diagram. So the autopilot trim servo tray sits in next to my fuel pump. If you remember, I installed an antenna under here and didn't realize the location of the servo tray and the fuel pump tray. I got lucky with the fuel pump tray, cut a little notch. I don't think I want to cut a notch out of this tray. I did change my design a little bit. I decided to cut a notch out of here. All these screws were screw holes, nut holes, were preset, and rather than measuring and drilling every one to line up, it seemed easier to take a little notch out of here. This is a pretty thick plate, and it's tied in by a lot of bolts, so it's structurally, I'm sure it's okay. I've got the whole thing in. At this point, I'm not tightened with the bolts. These have to go in a little further. They have to go in 10 screws. I've got to set that. There's one more bracket that I've got to put in here that attaches there. And then remember, I did prime the bottom of this because of the contact with the stainless cage. Although it's powder coated, the instructions say where aluminum comes in contact with the cage, it should be primed. So throwing a layer of primer on the bottom of the tray wasn't that big a deal. But other than putting that bracket in, I think I'm done with that one and can move over to my other one. The roll servo looks a lot like the pitch servo. You've got a servo tray that's going to go in. You've got the nuts, rib nuts you've got to put in. There are some spacers here, some small bushings that are going to have to get cut. I guess the tray needs to be a little higher. And instead of attaching to the control stick, it looks like the servo is going to take control of your aileron cables and wrap around here. Servo motor's the same, but the attachment's a little different. But other than that, it looks like a similar installation. These bushings in here are going to be interesting. The manual calls for them to be 3/8 of an inch, and they go between the servo tray, the mounting tray, and the bottom of this bracket to raise this up. As I come here and I put the servo over the 4 holes, I can see why it has to come up. These bolts, if they don't clear, they're below the level, so they've got to come up. And in order for these holes to line up, not only do the bolts have to come up, but this frame has to kind of come over the lip like this. You can see how I don't know if I can get that lip, the frame's got to come over the lip. Then if I take my caliper and I measure this gap right here between the hole and between the bottom of the tray and the frame, it is exactly 3/8. So if you cut this bushing anything short of 3/8, the mounting tray is not gonna come over the mounting bracket's not gonna come over this tray. So make sure it is 3/8 or just a fraction more than 3/8. Otherwise, you'll be recutting new bushings. Well, there's some good news and some bad news about the roll servo. The good news is it installs fairly easily. You've got some custom spacers that you've got to cut that go under here. You've got some spacers that go under here. The whole thing between this spacer and this spacer, this motor comes up by about 3/4 of an inch. But it's fairly easy, just cutting the bushings and creating the spacers. The other good news is, as you can see, my comm antenna is not going to be interfered. The servo works on the cable on this side, so I got lucky, both the comm and the transponder antenna, by just cutting some notches, and that one was more luck than anything else by how I placed it. I didn't realize that when I placed it I'd have so much conflict with these trays, these server trays and fuel pump tray. But I got lucky, so that one's going to work, and this one's going to work. What I didn't realize, and I hadn't seen it in any other videos, I thought someone would have mentioned it up to now, and I've watched a lot of different videos, I've watched them, is that you see this arm that's on this servo, which is very similar to this arm over here. Well, that works because that arm attaches to my control stick. Over here, you've got a cable, and this arm is not what is needed. What you need is what's called a cap scan wheel, which looks like this. And the cap scan wheel has the cable that wraps around it, and then it controls it by moving the wheel back and forth. Well, the cap scan wheel is not included with the Garmin servo, and it's not included with the RANS installation kit. It's an optional part from Garmin. That's $195. So it's not the $195. It's just I wish someone had mentioned it up to now that I got to order it. It takes about 2 weeks to get it, but I'm okay with that. I'm not ready to do anything more on those cables for 2 weeks anyways. But just if you're ordering your servos, or if you're going to put this in, don't forget to order a cap scan. Here it's indicated here. Cap scan wheel is what it's called. Okay, I'm not exactly sure where I left off with a couple different parts of the build. I had a couple things on hold because I was waiting for parts. I ended up driving out to pick up the parts. There's an aircraft spruce next to the airport where I fly out of, and I was flying today, so I picked up these parts that I actually had ordered and they didn't get sent. This is for that Garmin servo. This is the cap stand part that costs $192. This is just light aluminum. I assumed it would be a little heavier. This is probably I'll try and be generous, maybe a $25 casting part. I mean, there's really nothing to this. And Garmin, it doesn't even come in a box, for gosh sakes. It comes in a baggie. I went to the Garmin manual, and they've got the cap stand installation. And it looks like the first thing is this guard goes on, and you've got 4 holes there. The screws already have a Loctite on them, so you don't need to add any. Oh, you have to take the arm off first. The cotter pin gets thrown away, and they give you a new cotter pin. I think you use these bolts again, but the arm comes off. Then the guard goes on, and then the wheel goes on after, is what I'm telling. Oh, and in this cable, the cable they send you, the ball has to be top dead center when it comes out the 2 different ways versus the same way. And RANS also shows that in their diagram with the ball on top. So we'll start putting it together. Okay, I've got the cap stand on, and you can see the ball is at the top and slides freely. I need both hands to kind of pull these cables, but it does slide freely around for its 2.5 inches of travel. So I think we'll put the bracket into the plane. Okay, the roll servo is installed. Remember, you've got spacers both under the servo itself, and then another spacer that goes from the mounting tray to the frame to bring this whole thing up a little bit. I centered the stick and then pulled the cables tight, put the clamps on. There are 2 different size grooves in this clamp, one for the larger cable, one for the smaller, so make sure that's facing the right direction. And I think that's good to go. We'll see as we get further into the rigging. Then the pitch servo is on. I put that coupling on by screwing it back 21 times and then screwing it back onto that one 10 times. So they each have 10 threads. I had the mount, or the servo arm, straight up and down when I had the stick in about the neutral position. And there is a guard on this side that I put on, which is supposed to be second guard, a second stop for the arm so it doesn't go too far. The primary stop is the stick itself. So I think my servos are good. I think they're in. Well, that wraps that up. That section went pretty smooth, not a lot of issues. My build time for that was actually a fair amount when I added it up. It was 32.9 hours. There was about 4 hours of putting some noise insulation, fireproofing insulation in my floor, which I didn't include in the video, but that was installed. and that took about 4 or 5 hours. So that section was 32.9 hours, which brings my project build to date at 825.8 hours. So next video, we're start working on the panel. I've got a friend helping me a little bit who's got some experience in that, which will go a long way because this is a little overwhelming for me. You can see the mass of wires back there, and trying to get it all hooked up. But I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for watching. And with that, dream it and just build it.